The boy who sat alone, every day, until a retired teacher noticed. He sat at the table by the window with the same lunch and the same silence, every day, as if the world had decided long ago to forget he was there. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The bell rang at 11:40, and by 11:43 he was seated, tray in hand, back straight, eyes down. One half sandwich in a plastic bag, 6 apple slices wrapped in a paper towel, a bottle of water with no label. He never looked around. He never fidgeted. He just ate, slow and methodical, one bite at a time. Fork and napkin always lined up just right. Other kids passed by, loud and careless and full of motion. He didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his seat. He didn't look up. Elaine Martin noticed him for the first time on a Tuesday. She was walking down the east corridor of Lincoln Elementary, holding a canvas bag full of returned library books. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and pencil shavings. She passed the cafeteria without meaning to stop, but something in her made her glance sideways. She saw him then, alone, quiet, perfectly still. She kept walking. On Thursday, she saw him again. Same place, same time, same stillness. She paused a little longer this time. Students streamed in and around him like water around a stone. He didn't move. Elaine had taught for 42 years. She'd retired 2 springs ago and spent the summer planting a small garden behind her house and organizing family photos into neatly labeled boxes. When fall came, she'd volunteered at the school library, just enough to keep her busy. She didn't miss the meetings or the paperwork, but she missed the children, the routines, the small things that filled up a day, the moments no one else ever saw. She began watching for him. She never meant to, not exactly, but something about him pulled at her. She didn't know his name, didn't know his grade, but every Tuesday and Thursday, she passed the cafeteria on her way in, and there he was. Same table, same lunch, same silence. No one else seemed to notice. Teachers sat in the corner near the soda machine, chatting softly. Aides moved between tables with trash bags and quiet reminders. Kids clustered by grade, by friend group, by routine. But no one sat with him. No one spoke to him. No one looked in his direction. Elaine started timing her arrival so she'd catch that exact moment. 11:43, just as he sat down. She would walk past the cafeteria windows and glance in. Just for a second. Just to see if he was there. And he always was. On the 4th week, she slowed down, just enough to let her eyes linger. He was wearing the same navy sweatshirt he'd worn the last 3 times she'd seen him. Faded at the cuffs. A size too big. His backpack was always beside him on the bench, zipped tight, untouched through the whole meal. He took the same number of bites every day. He left nothing on the tray. He never rushed. He never stalled. And when the bell rang at 12:10, he stood, picked up his tray, and disappeared down the hallway like a shadow that didn't want to be followed. Elaine asked herself why she noticed. Maybe it was because she'd seen too many students like him over the years. The quiet ones. The overlooked ones. The ones who weren't loud enough to be trouble but not bright enough to stand out. The ones who moved from classroom to classroom and year to year without ever really being seen. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the way he sat so still. The way he seemed to have folded himself in, like he had learned how to take up less space. Like he didn't expect anyone to make room for him. Elaine didn't speak to him that day, or the next. She didn't change her routine, but she started packing an extra juice box in her bag, just in case. She didn't know his name. Not yet. but she had noticed him. And once you notice something like that, it was hard to unsee. On Tuesday, she brought the juice box. It wasn't much, just the kind you'd find in a 12-pack at the grocery store. Apple. No straw attached. She tucked it in the side pocket of her bag before leaving the house, told herself it was nothing, just a small kindness, just something to do. But it stayed on her mind all morning, through shelving books, answering student questions, and logging returned copies of Charlotte's Web and Because of Winn-Dixie. It was still there, quiet, unopened, waiting. At 11:39, Elaine slipped out of the library and headed toward the cafeteria. She walked slower than usual. Her shoes made a soft tapping sound on the tile, and she could hear the rising voices from inside the cafeteria. The steady hum of lunchtime, trays clattering, laughter, chairs scraping back. She paused by the doorframe. He was already seated. Same spot, same posture, same small, silent lunch. She stepped inside. No one noticed her. That part didn't surprise her. She was invisible in that way now, older, retired, passing through rooms like a breeze under the door. She made her way to his table, keeping her pace calm, steady. He didn't look up as she approached. His focus was on the apple slices, lined up like clock hands. She didn't speak. She simply placed the juice box at the edge of his tray, then turned, walked out the door, and didn't look back. It wasn't an act of bravery. It wasn't even a plan. She just didn't know what else to do. A conversation felt too heavy, a question too loud. So she offered something small, something quiet. She didn't expect anything in return. But the next day she noticed. The juice box was still on the table. Empty now, the straw tucked back into the hole like it had never been used. He hadn't thrown it away. He'd finished it, then left it, like it mattered, like it meant something. She stood just outside the cafeteria door, watching him from the hallway. He didn't look around. He didn't search the room. He just sat there, eating slowly, the empty juice box standing upright beside his sandwich like a centerpiece. Elaine walked back to the library without a word. That night, she didn't sleep much. She thought about his face, the way he kept his head down, the way his shoulders curved in slightly, like he was trying to disappear into himself. He reminded her of someone, not a student, but a boy from her early years of teaching. First grade, a child who had bounced between foster homes, who had never brought a lunch, who had sat alone in the corner until she started keeping crayons at his desk. Not to fix anything, just to show he belonged. Elaine packed another juice box the next morning. On Thursday, she left it again. Same place, same quiet. This time, he looked up. Just for a second. She caught it out of the corner of her eye as she turned to leave. A flicker. His eyes, dark, wide, cautious, lifting toward her for the briefest moment, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to look, then back down, back to the apple slices. But she had seen it. She said nothing, still didn't speak, just walked out again. But in her chest, something shifted. It was the smallest thing, the gentlest motion. A boy at a table, a woman passing by, a juice box exchanged between them. No storybook ending, no breakthrough, just a pause in the routine, just something new introduced into a rhythm that had never changed. The next Tuesday she packed 2, just in case. Elaine didn't like asking questions she couldn't answer herself, but after 2 weeks of juice boxes and silent glances, the question became too loud to ignore. Who was he? Not just his name, not just his grade or teacher. She wanted to know the shape of his story. Why he sat so still. Why no one sat near him. Why it seemed like he was holding his breath through every lunch period. She started simple. On her way to the library, she stopped by the front office, asked the secretary, Ruth, a woman she'd known since the district still used chalkboards and overhead projectors. "That boy at the window table," Elaine said, careful to keep her voice low. "The one who sits alone. Do you know who he is?" Ruth looked up from her paperwork, blinked. "Which one?" "He eats lunch by himself, always same time. Brown bag lunch. No one ever joins him." Ruth thought for a moment, then gave a slow shrug. "There are a few like that." Elaine nodded politely, thanked her, and continued on. She tried again the next day, this time stopping in the teacher's lounge. A younger third-grade teacher named Amanda was heating soup in the microwave. Elaine asked her too. Amanda frowned, thinking, "Oh, maybe you mean Joshua? Or Tyler? No, wait, Eli. He's in Ms. Kramer's class. Quiet kid. Never says much. Came mid-year, I think. Might be Foster. I'm not sure." That was the first time Elaine heard a name. Eli. It fit somehow. She didn't ask any more questions. Didn't pry. But the pieces started forming quietly in her mind. Transferred mid-year. No real friends. Possibly in foster care. That explained the silence, maybe. The distance. The way he never looked around like he expected anything. Like he'd already been trained not to. That Thursday, she packed a chocolate chip granola bar with the juice box. She left it the same way. No note, no words. Just placed it gently on the edge of his tray and walked away. He didn't look up that time. But when she passed by again 10 minutes later, both items were gone. The next Tuesday, she walked a little slower when she entered the cafeteria. The air was loud with voices, trays clattering, sneakers squeaking on linoleum. She paused at the doorway and looked toward the window table. He was already there. But something was different. He wasn't eating yet. He was waiting. Not obviously. Not in a way most would notice. But Elaine saw it. His hands were folded in his lap. His sandwich unopened. His backpack zipped tight. His gaze fixed not on the table, but on the entrance. Just for a second. Just long enough to catch her eye. Then down again. She felt her breath catch. Just a little. When she reached his table, she didn't say anything. Just set down the juice box and a small carton of crackers, then turned to leave. But this time, as she stepped away, she heard it. A sound so soft, she almost missed it. "Thank you." It wasn't loud. It wasn't certain. But it was his voice. She didn't turn around, didn't make a moment out of it. She kept walking, but every step felt different after that. Lighter, quieter, like something had shifted between them, even if neither of them fully understood what it was. Back in the library, Elaine sat at her desk and opened the attendance system on the old-school computer. She typed in the name Amanda had given her, Eli, and scanned the list. There he was, Eli Dawson, grade 4, transferred in February, no parent listed, just the name of a caseworker and a phone number that led to a local agency. She didn't write it down. She didn't plan anything. She just sat there for a long moment, staring at his name on the screen, the blinking cursor beside it waiting for her to do something. But she already had. She'd seen him. And now she couldn't unsee. On Thursday, Elaine didn't bring a juice box. She brought 2 peanut butter crackers, a folded napkin, and a second sandwich. It felt bold, too bold maybe, but something about the way he had looked at her last time, the quiet thank you, the glance up as she approached, made her wonder if it was time. Not to ask questions, not to push, just to be there. A little closer, a little more present. She passed the library early, her canvas bag tucked beneath her arm, the sandwich wrapped in wax paper inside. The halls were quieter than usual. A few students passed her, nodding politely. No one else spoke. By 11:42, she was near the cafeteria. She paused again just outside the door, took a breath, and stepped inside. He was already there. Same seat, same posture. But his hands were on the table this time, fingers lightly touching the edge of his tray. He looked up as she walked in, briefly, quickly, then back down again. But it was enough. It was the first time he'd acknowledged her presence before she reached the table. Elaine didn't stop at the edge today. She walked to the far end of the bench opposite him and sat down slowly. Not close, not across from him, just near enough to share the space. She didn't speak, didn't make a show of it, just opened her sandwich, unwrapped it carefully, and began to eat. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She didn't watch him, didn't expect anything. She just let the silence settle, let it wrap around them like an old sweater pulled from a drawer. Across the table, he opened his sandwich. Turkey and cheese again, from the look of it. Neatly packed, no crusts. He took a small bite, then another, still silent. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Elaine kept eating. The cafeteria buzzed around them, filled with the usual lunchtime chaos. But at their table, it was quiet. Not tense, not uncomfortable, just still. And then, without warning, he spoke. "Why?" She looked up. His eyes didn't meet hers, but they were aimed in her direction now, fixed on the edge of her tray. "Why what?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle. He didn't answer right away, just shrugged, eyes dropping back to his sandwich. Elaine waited. A few seconds later, he said, "Why are you sitting here?" She smiled softly, but not in a way that showed teeth, just enough to be felt in her voice. "I used to be a teacher," she said. "Sometimes I still feel like one." He didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either. He didn't close off. "I noticed you sit here alone," she added. "I like it that way," he said quickly, almost defensive. "I know," she said. "I'm not here to change that." That seemed to surprise him. He looked up again, just for a moment. Not long, but long enough. Elaine unwrapped the crackers, broke off a piece and set it on the napkin between them. He didn't take it. Not yet. But he didn't move away either. "I just thought maybe today," she said, "you wouldn't have to eat alone." He didn't reply, but halfway through lunch, he reached forward, took the cracker, and set it beside his apple slices without a word. It was enough. The bell rang at 12:10, and he stood, picked up his tray, slipped his backpack over one shoulder. As he walked past her, he paused. "Your sandwich smells like peanut butter," he said. Elaine nodded. It was. He nodded back, almost invisible, then disappeared into the crowd. Back in the library, she sat behind the desk and stared at the books stacked for reshelving. But she didn't move. Something had shifted. He had spoken. She hadn't asked him to. And now, they weren't just two people in the same room. They were something more. The next Tuesday, he was already waiting when she arrived. Elaine stepped into the cafeteria at her usual time, walking with the same slow pace, canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She scanned the room instinctively, eyes passing over the clatter and motion of lunch tables before settling on the far window. He was there. Same table, same posture. But this time, he wasn't eating yet. His tray was untouched. the sandwich still wrapped, the apple slices still lined up in their paper towel. He sat still, watching the door like he was expecting something, or someone. Elaine didn't pause at the entrance. She walked directly to the bench and sat, same spot as before, near the end of the table, but not too far. Not too close, either. He looked at her once, then back at his tray. Neither of them said anything right away. Elaine unpacked her lunch slowly. Turkey and cheese sandwich, a carton of milk, 2 small peanut butter cookies she'd tucked into a napkin that morning. She set them between them again. No invitation, no explanation. Just there. He opened his sandwich. Bit by bit, the silence filled in, not as something awkward, but as something familiar. They ate. They sat. The cafeteria moved around them, but it didn't come into their space. It stayed just outside the invisible line they had both drawn. Halfway through the meal, he spoke. "Do you come here just for this?" Elaine finished chewing before she answered. "No. I work in the library. I'm retired, but I help out sometimes. With the younger grades mostly. I shelve books, check things in, read with a few kids." He nodded slightly, as if this made sense. She waited a moment, then asked gently, "What about you? Do you like reading?" He shrugged. "Sometimes." "What kind of books?" Another shrug. Then, "I don't know. Adventure stuff, I guess. I read this one last year. Something with a ship, and a kid who gets stuck on an island." Elaine smiled. "Island of the Blue Dolphins?" He shook his head. "No, the other one. The one with the plane crash." "The Hatchet series," she said softly. He looked at her just briefly. "Yeah, that one." They went quiet again, but the kind of quiet that didn't need fixing. A few minutes later he said, "Nobody's ever sat here before." "Not even once?" she asked. "No, they don't really talk to me." "Do you want them to?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know," he said. "I guess sometimes it's easier not to." Elaine nodded. "I understand." She didn't press. She didn't offer advice. She didn't tell him what to do or how to feel. She just let his words settle, like small stones dropped gently into water. After a while, she slid one of the cookies across the napkin. He took it. They finished lunch like that, side by side, speaking only when something wanted to be said. When the bell rang, he stood, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and picked up his tray. Elaine expected him to walk away without a word, like before, but he hesitated. "My name's Eli," he said quietly. She looked up and smiled. "Nice to meet you, Eli. I'm Elaine." He nodded, then walked out, the strap of his backpack bouncing softly against his side. Back in the library, she found herself scanning the shelves for Hatchet, fingers brushing against the worn spines of the books. She pulled it down, checked the condition, and set it aside, just in case he wanted it. He hadn't asked, but he had told her his name. And sometimes, that's all someone needs to say. On Thursday, Elaine brought the book. She wrapped it gently in a soft cloth, the way one might with a keepsake, and tucked it into her canvas bag beside the usual sandwich and a fresh pack of crackers. The cover was a little worn, the corners rounded from years of being read and reread, but the pages were clean. Inside the front flap, she'd written his name in pencil. Eli. Just in case he needed to be reminded it was his. She arrived a few minutes early. The hallways were still settling from the last bell, and the cafeteria hadn't filled yet. Through the glass pane on the door, she could see him already at the table. Same spot, same posture. But this time, he wasn't just sitting. He was watching, waiting. His backpack sat beside him, unzipped. Elaine stepped inside. He looked up before she reached him, and this time he didn't look away. She smiled and sat down in her usual place, unwrapping her sandwich with practiced ease. Then, gently, she reached into her bag and pulled out the book, setting it on the table between them, without saying a word. He stared at it, then at her, then back at the book. "You said you liked it," she said softly. "I thought you might want your own copy." Eli reached forward slowly, like he wasn't sure it was really meant for him. His fingers touched the cover, traced the title, Hatchet, by Gary Paulson. "This is mine?" he asked, eyes wide. "It is," Elaine nodded. "You can keep it. Or not. No pressure." He opened the front cover and saw his name. He didn't smile, not exactly, but something in his face loosened. A quiet softening, a moment of weight being lifted, even just a little. "No one's ever given me a book before," he said. Elaine's voice stayed steady. "I hope it's not the last." They sat like that for a while, Eli flipping through the pages slowly, like he wanted to read each one without rushing. He didn't speak much that day. Neither did she. But the silence between them had changed. It wasn't the quiet of strangers anymore. It was the quiet of trust. Halfway through lunch, he asked, "Did you ever read this one?" Elaine nodded. "Many times. I used to teach it in 5th grade. "I'm only in 4th, he said with a small shrug. "You're reading it just fine." He didn't argue. After a few minutes, he slid the book carefully into his backpack and zipped it up again. Then he turned to her. "Do you miss teaching?" The question surprised her. "I do," she said after a pause. "Not all the parts, but some of them." "Like what?" She thought for a moment. "Like mornings," she said, "when the classroom smelled like sharpened pencils and cold air, and the kids would come in with their backpacks too big for their backs and their eyes still sleepy, and the quiet before the day began." Eli didn't respond right away, but she could tell he was listening. "What else?" he asked, voice quieter now. Elaine smiled. "The moments when someone figured something out. When a kid would light up because they finally understood something that had felt hard. Not just math or reading, but something about themselves." He looked down at his tray. "I was never good at that," he said. "At what?" "Figuring stuff out." Elaine shook her head gently. "I think you figured out more than you know." The bell rang before he could reply. He stood, grabbed his tray, and adjusted the backpack on his shoulder with the book safely inside. He didn't say goodbye, but just before he walked out, he paused. "You're not like other grown-ups," he said. Elaine tilted her head slightly. "Is that good or bad?" Eli shrugged, but this time there was the smallest flicker of a smile. "Just different," he said. Then he turned and disappeared into the hallway. And for the first time in weeks, Elaine let herself sit for a long moment after he left, her hands still resting on the table, her heart quietly full. She hadn't fixed anything. But maybe that was never the point. By the 3rd week, the school counselor knew Elaine's name, not because of a problem, not because of a report, but because someone had finally taken an interest. A quiet boy, a consistent lunch companion, a change in routine that hadn't gone unnoticed. Elaine hadn't planned to meet her. She'd just dropped by the office after returning a book one of the first graders had left in the nurse's room. The counselor's door had been open. Elaine had seen a nameplate, Rachel Benton, LCSW, and before she could second-guess herself, she'd knocked. Rachel looked up from her desk and smiled. "Hi there. Can I help you?" Elaine stepped in, careful not to let her voice carry. I was hoping you might tell me a little about a student. I know there are rules, and I'm not trying to intrude, but I've been having lunch with him." Rachel's smile didn't fade. "You must be Ms. Martin. Eli mentioned you." Elaine paused. "He did?" Rachel nodded, gesturing toward the chair across from her. "He called you the library lady who sits quiet. Said you gave him a book. That's more than he's said about anyone in months." Elaine sat. She didn't ask for details right away, just waited. Rachel reached for a folder from the side of her desk. She didn't open it, just rested her hand on top of it. "He came to us in February," Rachel said. "Transferred from a neighboring district. Prior placement fell through. He's currently with a temporary foster family. Good people, but the placement's still considered short-term." Elaine nodded slowly. "He's never been a behavior issue," Rachel continued. "No incidents, no disruptions, but no real connections either. Teachers say he's polite, quiet, capable, but isolated, hard to engage. We've tried a few support groups, peer mentoring. Nothing really stuck." "Until now," Elaine said. Rachel smiled again. "Apparently so." There was a long pause between them, filled only by the faint hum of the overhead lights. Elaine looked down at her hands. "I've seen kids like him before. In my classroom. They slip through the cracks. Not because no one cares, but because they don't ask for anything." Rachel leaned back slightly in her chair. "Exactly. We're trained to look for red flags. Anger, acting out, disruption. But the quiet ones, they just disappear if we're not paying attention." Elaine looked up. "He hasn't disappeared?" "No," Rachel said gently. "Thanks to you." Elaine didn't answer that. She wasn't looking for credit. Rachel continued. "He's opened up more in the last week than he has all semester. Nothing dramatic, just small things, questions, comments, little observations about the lunchroom or the library. But it's something." Elaine nodded again. "That's how it starts." Rachel smiled. "You'd be surprised how rare that kind of presence is. Just sitting with someone, not trying to fix them, just seeing them." "I'm not doing much," Elaine said softly. "You're doing exactly what he needs," Rachel replied. Elaine sat for another minute, her thoughts turning over slowly. She hadn't realized how thin the line could be, between being invisible and being seen. Eli had been balancing on it for who knows how long, and no one had noticed until now. Before she left, Rachel said one more thing. "He asked if you'd be there next week. I told him I thought you would." Elaine smiled. "He's right." Back in the library, she pulled a book from the shelf and ran her fingers along the spine. Bridge to Terabithia, another story about loneliness, friendship, the quiet ways people save each other. She set it on the counter, just in case. She wasn't trying to rescue him. She just didn't want him to sit alone. And now, she knew he didn't want that either. It rained on Tuesday. Not the soft kind that taps gently against windows, but the heavy kind that makes everything feel slower, thicker, quieter. Students came in soaked at the hems, backpacks damp, shoes squeaking across the linoleum. The cafeteria was louder than usual, packed tighter than it had been in weeks. Recess had been canceled, and the energy had nowhere to go but up. Elaine arrived just before lunch started. She shook the water from her umbrella at the entrance, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the cafeteria with her canvas bag in hand. Her hair was damp at the edges, her sweater clinging to her shoulders, but she didn't care. Today felt different. When she stepped inside, the noise hit her all at once. Trays clattering, chairs scraping, voices bouncing off every surface. She scanned the room, a little slower than usual. For a moment, she couldn't see him. Then she did. He was sitting at their table, backpack tucked neatly beside him. But this time, something had changed. He wasn't alone. A girl sat across from him, small, maybe third grade, her hair in two tight braids. She was talking softly, animatedly, her hands moving as she spoke. Eli wasn't talking back. Not yet. But he was listening. His shoulders weren't as tight. His eyes were looking up. Elaine smiled quietly and walked toward them. When Eli saw her, his face shifted. Not into a smile, he still didn't smile easily, but into something open, something expectant. He raised his hand slightly in a wave, not big, just enough to say, "I see you." Elaine nodded in return and took her usual seat at the end of the bench. The girl noticed her too. "Hi," she said without hesitation. "I'm Margot. I'm in Ms. Ellis's class." Elaine smiled warmly. "Hello, Margot. I'm Elaine." "Eli said you're a teacher," Margot continued, munching on a baby carrot. "I used to be," Elaine said. "She still is," Eli said suddenly. Both Margot and Elaine turned to look at him. He didn't flinch. He looked down, opened his sandwich, and added, "She just doesn't have a classroom." Elaine didn't answer right away. It was the most he had ever said in front of her. "Some of the best teaching happens outside the classroom," she said gently. Eli gave a small nod. Margot crunched another carrot. For a while, the three of them sat there, eating quietly, the storm still thundering outside. The cafeteria noise kept on, but it didn't seem to touch their corner of the room. It was like the rest of the world had blurred a little, just enough to give them space. Halfway through lunch, Eli started talking. Not just a sentence here or there, but real conversation. He told Margot about the book he'd started reading the night before. He told Elaine he liked the way the main character thought, alone, but not weak. He mentioned the plane crash, the way the boy had survived by paying attention. "I like that," Eli said. "How he notices everything." Elaine nodded. "It's how he stays alive." Eli looked at her. "That's how I feel sometimes." He didn't say it like a confession. He said it like a fact, like something he'd carried quietly for a long time. Elaine didn't respond right away. She just reached into her bag and pulled out another book, My Side of the Mountain. She slid it across the table to him. "This one's about noticing too," she said, "and about building something with your own two hands." He touched the cover. "Looks old." "It is," she smiled, "but it holds up." The bell rang not long after. The cafeteria burst into motion again, trays being cleared, voices rising, chairs scraping hard. Margot stood first. "See you tomorrow, Eli." He nodded. "Yeah." She left, weaving through the crowd. Eli lingered. He zipped the book into his backpack carefully, then looked at Elaine. "Thanks for sitting with me," he said. "Thank you for letting me," she replied. He nodded once, then walked out into the hall with his hood up, shoulders steady. Elaine stayed at the table a moment longer, watching the rain run down the windows. The boy who once sat alone had waited for her today. And for the first time, he wasn't just seen. He was heard. Elaine's last day before summer break came on a warm Thursday morning, the kind that carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and sunscreen through open hallways. The final week of school always felt a little scattered. Half-packed classrooms, year-end assemblies, kids buzzing with the kind of restless energy only June could bring. She arrived early, earlier than usual, earlier than necessary. Not because she had anything urgent to do, but because she wanted to walk the halls one more time while they were still quiet. She passed the bulletin boards filled with faded construction paper art, the walls lined with photos from field trips and spirit days. Every corner of the building hummed with the slow turning of a page. In her bag, she carried one last book. Not a classic, not a survival story, just a slim paperback journal with a cloth spine and blank pages. No inscription, no title, just space. She reached the cafeteria at 11:42. Eli was already at the table. He looked up the moment she walked in. No hesitation, no delay. His hand raised slightly in a wave, the same one he'd given her every day for the past 2 weeks. But today, there was something else behind it, something almost like a smile. Elaine walked over, set down her lunch, and took her seat. He was already mid-sandwich. His apple slices were arranged in a neat arc beside his tray, as usual. But now they sat beside a library book and a folded piece of paper with her name on it, written in pencil. She didn't touch it. Not yet. "I heard it's your last day," Eli said quietly. Elaine nodded. "It is. Summer's coming." He looked down at the paper in front of him, then back up at her. "I wrote you something." She reached for it slowly, unfolded it, and began to read. The handwriting was small, careful, not perfect, but honest. "Dear Ms. Elaine, thanks for sitting with me. I didn't know grown-ups did that if they didn't have to. I thought maybe you saw something wrong and were trying to fix it. But you didn't try to fix me. You just stayed. That helped more. I wanted you to know I liked the books. I want to keep reading. I don't know what happens next, but I don't feel invisible anymore. I think that's something." Eli. Elaine folded the paper gently, placed it back on the table, and let the words settle between them. "It's more than something," she said. He looked down again, a little shy now. She reached into her bag and slid the blank journal across the table. "I thought maybe you'd want to try writing your own story," she said. "No rules, no grades, just whatever's inside you." He picked it up carefully, ran his fingers across the cover. "Can I really?" "You already started." They sat in silence for a while after that. Not awkward, not heavy, just quiet. When the bell rang, the room began to move again. Trays being lifted, chairs scraping back, kids filing out into the early afternoon sun. Eli stood, tucking the journal into his backpack. Before he turned to leave, he looked at her one last time. "Will you come back next year?" Elaine paused, then smiled. "If I'm still needed." "You are," he said. Then he was gone. Elaine remained at the table a few minutes longer, letting the crowd pass, letting the moment linger. She looked at the note again, her fingers brushing over the pencil lines. Then she folded it one last time, placed it in her bag, and stood. She walked through the hall slowly, the voices fading behind her, the sunlight filling the corridors. The building was still, but not empty. It carried something now. A story that had started with silence and ended with being seen. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.